Welcome to the Asia Pacific Network of Healthcare Service Regulators, or APAC Network's webinar series. My name is Kavita Parniyappan, and I am an assistant professor and project lead at the Center of Regulatory Excellence, or CORE, at the Duke-NUS University of Singapore Medical School. This webinar is part of the ongoing activities planned under the aegis of the APAC Network of Healthcare Service Regulators. This network was developed by the Ministry of Health Singapore in June 2022 to provide a platform on which individual economies from the region could share their regulatory context and best practices in healthcare regulations to foster stronger relationships. The aim was to learn from experiences and encourage regulatory collaboration among the economies by focusing on local and regional challenges with greater relevance and value. Since October 2022, the network has already had several knowledge-sharing meetings and engagements attended by 10 economies, including Singapore. The APAC Network webinar series is another sharing platform that allows us to learn and build ideas and best practices to address emerging healthcare issues from experts in this field. The webinar will bring experts from across the world to share their knowledge and experiences on focused topics of interest for the members of the APAC network. Today, I'm delighted to introduce our distinguished speaker, Ms Sophie Walsh, Senior Implementation Lead in Social Care UK. Sophie is a Senior Strategy Implement Lead in the DHSC Medical Technology team. Previously, Sophie worked on the development of the UK government's first medical technology strategy, which was published in February 2023. She worked in consultation with the UK health system, industry stakeholders, and patient groups to establish the priorities to be taken forward to further strengthen the UK's medical technology sector. Since the publication of the strategy document, she has worked across several key initiatives to implement innovative and dynamic markets, including the Innovative Devices Access Pathway Pilot, the innovation classification, and the development of a national methodology for assessing the value of medical technology. Today, Ms Walsh will be speaking on the UK's Innovative Devices Access Pathway Pilot, known as IDAP, which was launched in September 2023. The IDAP pilot is designed to accelerate the development of innovative medical devices that meet an unmet clinical need in England's National Healthcare Service and support their integration into the UK market. It is a collaborative effort to provide tailored advice on how to navigate the pathway from pre-regulation to adoption into the NHS. This presentation will provide an overview of the IDAP pilot, including its unique offer to industry and international applicants, and outline the wider work the UK government is working on to progress innovation as part of the medical technology strategy. We hope that you here today can provide you with insights and empower you in your work with medical technology adoption and regulation. There will be an opportunity in the last 10 to 15 minutes or so for you to post your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. I trust that I've spoken enough, and it is my pleasure now to hand over the time to Ms Sophie Walsh. Sophie, the time is yours.
Thank you so much, Kavita, and thank you everybody for having me today. I'll just pop my slides up on the screen. Hopefully they'll come through smoothly. Hopefully everyone can see my slides there. So, hey everybody, as Kavita said, I'm Sophie Walsh. I'm a Senior Implementation Lead in the Department of Health and Social Care in the UK, and I lead on a number of initiatives, but also the Innovative Devices Access Pathway Pilot. So today I was going to run through a bit of an overview of the Department of Health and Social Care, just to set the scene a little bit, and then an overview of the IDAP pilot, the IDAP pilot cohort, which we announced in February this year, what we're offering through the pilot, through the delivery of our tools, and then setting into that into the context of the UK's wider medtech strategy as well. And then I'll also touch on the medical device regulation reform that's currently ongoing across England. So DHSC is a ministerial department of His Majesty's government in the UK, and we deliver policy to support ministers to lead the nation's health and social care to help people live more independent, healthier lives for longer. The department is about 3,000 people, but we flex to meet demands such as the COVID-19 pandemic. But we can't deliver our priorities in isolation, and we have a range of agencies and partners, including NHS England, the National Institute for Health and Care Research, UK Health Security Agency, NICE, MHRA, and many others. And you may recognise a few names as I go through the overview of the IDAP as well. We also have a number of organisations across England itself which support innovation specifically, and these are called Health Innovation Networks. They're funded by a combination of UK government and the NHS, and they support the uptake of innovation at a local level. Moving on to the IDAP pilot itself. So the IDAP pilot is one of a number of initiatives we're progressing as part of the UK's MedTech strategy published last year and subsequent one-year report published last month. We have a real push on clarifying the pathway to innovation and creating a streamlined approach to accessing the UK market, from the inception of an idea and demand signalling through various assessments, including regulation and tech assessments, health tech assessments, to the adoption into the NHS and fundamentally reaching our patients. As aforementioned, IDAP is the first programme that connects many of these key system partners and milestones in the adoption journey. So the IDAP is a multi-partner programme, so we're supported in delivery by Health Tech Wales, NHS England, NICE, MHRA and the Scottish Health Technology Group, and we're supporting 8 innovative technologies that meet an unmet need in the NHS and currently do not have regulatory authorisation in the UK, and providing support on things like post-market surveillance requirements, further evidence generation for health tech assessments and supporting access into the NHS. We're currently in the pilot of the IDAP, though we're intending for it to become a formal programme following the end of March 2025, subject to the outcome of the pilot. For the pilot itself, it was open to international applicants, and there may be subject to change with the formal programme for the technologies selected against the selection criteria. But the selection criteria for the pilot itself was they had to be the product had to address a life-threatening or seriously debilitating disease with significant patient need. It had to be innovative and transformative. It had to provide system-wide benefits, and it had to address one of the life science vision missions. So this covers things like obesity, Alzheimer's, mental health, and these are the priority areas that were identified in 2021 as areas of key issues across England. We're keeping the pilot under review as we progress. And then as we turn it into a formal programme, we will continue to learn lessons and seeking feedback from industry, both from those that have been selected to participate in the pilot and those that applied were not successful. So I will go into this in a lot more detail in the slides later, but to provide a very brief overview of the support provided. All technologies submitted an expression of interest in autumn last year, and we announced the successful technologies in February this year. All successful technologies received a target development profile, so they sat down with the partners and specialists in the field of medtech access and went through in detail the exact requirements and support needed to get their technology through regulatory and health tech assessments ahead of applying for a UK CA marking. And each of these technologies and companies got a roadmap which set out exactly what support they were expected to receive through the pilot. Just to flag, the tools are not delivered sequentially, but can be provided at any point depending on the specific needs of that technology and the company, and the technology's maturity as well. So the IDAP system navigation tool, which runs along the bottom there, is all about encompassing support. Is that all-encompassing support tool, and companies are supplied with a single point of contact for the pilots for any questions and signposting to different partners, delivering the tools, but also to other support processes. So moving on to the IDAP pilot cohort itself. So we have 8 technologies. We took a portfolio approach to selecting these technologies, which means because we're only running the pilot for just over a year, we wanted to make sure that we were testing all the different tools that I just went through there. So we've selected a range of technologies that are early, mid or late in their maturity journey, have a range of disease areas, and also variations of medical devices as well. So we have a mix of digital devices themselves, which I'll just run through now. So we have a new amyloid plasma panel from Roche Diagnostics, which is a blood test for Alzheimer's disease that finds if patients with cognitive impairment require further testing or imaging. A histotripsy-based device from Histonics. So this is a new method to identify and destroy liver cancer tumours using focused ultrasonic waves, avoiding the typical treatment side effects. A portable blood test from Upfront Diagnostics. This is a device that allows paramedics to quickly triage stroke patients, potentially easing emergency department pressures. AI software from Linus Health. So this uses data from wearable devices to predict hospital admission rates for patients with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. An ear oximeter from EarSwitch, which measures oxygen levels from the inner ear canal, offering potentially more accurate readings regardless of skin pigmentation. Avigen Limited have developed a multiple sclerosis fatigue app. This is a smartphone application providing exercises and therapies customized for managing multiple sclerosis. 52 North Limited, which has a self test for neutropenia. This enables chemotherapy patients to self-test for neutropenic sepsis using a finger prick blood test. And an infection predictor from Pre-Symptom Health. This is an algorithm that predicts the onset of systemic inflammatory response syndrome days before the typical diagnosis is possible. So what do we offer through the IDAP itself? So we have a range of tools all aimed at helping to streamline that pathway to and access to the NHS. So we have a clinical investigation review. This is led by MHRA, our regulatory agency, and support technologies wishing to submit a clinical investigation application. For the IDAP, the MHRA technical and clinical review of the clinical investigation application is reduced from 60 days to 30 days to help with that expedited process. We also provide a joint scientific advice meeting. This is led by NICE, our health tech assessment agency, and they have a specific remit. The specific remit of this meeting is to provide advice on evidence generation plans from the regulatory and also the health tech assessment perspective. We have clinical experts, health tech assessments, and patient experts on board with these meetings. System navigation, so as I went through before, this tool provides the continuous point of contact between the manufacturer and the IDAP process and facilitates entry to other IDAP pilot tools. The system navigation tool facilitates communication between the manufacturer and the other IDAP partners where necessary, and where possible, it may also provide signposting to other life sciences and medtech innovation ecosystem partners where additional support is required. So, for example, where I mentioned the health innovation networks earlier in the presentation. We have an approved body strategy tool. So where deemed appropriate, although the UK approved bodies are not permitted to provide advice and guidance directly to the medical device manufacturer, this tool enables MHRA to seek the view from the manufacturer to the selected UK approved body on any issues that the manufacturer might face when they go through to applying for their UKCA marking. It will be used to inform the provision of guidance to that manufacturer by the MHRA through the target development profile, roadmaps, or at the joint scientific advice meetings. And then we have safe harbour meetings with the health tech assessments with the HTAs, bodies, the NHS and other key system stakeholders. And they discuss product realisation, NHS adoption and commercial challenges. And there may be commissioners, patient experts and clinicians present. The discussion at this meeting is intended to discuss the market access challenges, the optimal use of the technology, so going through use cases from the company, service delivery implications, commissioning, implementation, procurement, infrastructure changes, facilitating the adoption of the product. So it's sort of like everything they're going to face when they come to adopting the technology. In terms of the health tech assessments themselves, it will be advice on the high-level health tech assessment challenges rather than specifically reviewing the evidence collected and ensuring the company has everything suitably lined up to then support them at the streamlining when they get to that health tech assessment stage. In addition to these tools, we also provide support with the exceptional use authorization. So the exceptional use authorization guidance process provides an assessment to grant the exceptional use authorization, which would enable a non-UKCA marked product to be placed on the UK market, the GB market, and enable them to get that real world evidence, which will then support them in their UKCA application and HTA assessment. This is only a temporary grant and only the company must be working towards their UKCA marking. And it's not guaranteed through the IDAP and not a specific tool, but we do support them in the process. So just having a quick look over the timeframes. Looking at how we got here and where we're going. So the IDAP timeline we announced in February and we've since been busy providing the early tools to the companies. We began with that initial system navigation meeting and then we provide an overview of the IDAP. We had an early introductions and engagements and then we moved into the target development profiles. We've now issued a target development profile to each of the companies and we're now delivering the tools themselves. The pilot ends at the end of this financial year, but we're already beginning to think about the second IDAP and what a business as usual pilot program would look like. So we're looking at what this will involve, such as how do we position the pilot externally, but we'll be but we do expect it to be open internationally again. But as I mentioned before, IDAP is just one of a range of initiatives looking to support the adoption of innovation into our health system. So in February 2023, we published the government's inaugural medtech strategy. This set out how over the next 5 to 10 years, we will ensure the health and social care system can reliably access safe, effective and innovative technologies. These technologies will enable the delivery of high quality care, outstanding patient safety and excellent health outcomes while making the best use of taxpayer money. 1 year into the delivery of the medtech strategy, we're pleased to present an update on our achievements towards establishing an innovation pathway to realise our vision of the right product, right price and right place. Medtech is integral to tackling our major health challenges with the ability to transform care and improve both productivity and patient outcomes. It plays an important role at each point in the patient's care pathway, from prevention through to diagnostics, treatment and aftercare. So we've positioned here the different initiatives we have through the medtech strategy, but positioned through the innovation pathway itself. So we have a range of initiatives. I'll just touch on a few of them. So we have the Innovation Classification Framework, which was published at the same time as the 1 year on document. This aims to clarify the language around innovation. So when we were developing the medtech strategy, something we heard throughout from stakeholders, both across the health system, industry, patients, is that innovation has lost meaning and is a bit of a rubber stamp that's applied to technologies, as opposed to fully understanding how that technology differs from what already exists on the market. So we performed a thorough literature review, looking at all the innovation language that's already out there, the definitions, what language people are using already, and then working with those stakeholders, coming to a decision on what the 3 types of innovation that we see are, and then supporting definitions for them. And we formalised this into a framework. We've also clarified within that framework what we see as out of scope of innovation, so things like copycat devices and continuous improvement. We have Design for Life, which moves towards more resilient supply chains and looking to develop a more circular economy principles. Approvals, we work with MHRA on the regulatory reform and with NICE on late stage assessment. So this is about products that are already on the market. How can we assess them and understand which may offer the most value, whether that's value for money or value for patient outcomes, for example. Funding and commercial. In November last year, we announced the Health Tech Adoption and Acceleration Fund. So this was a pot of money provided to each regionally across England, providing the NHS at the local level with funding to procure innovation. We also have the dynamic purchasing system, which was announced earlier this year. So this is a specific framework with NHS supply chain, which is focused on listing innovative products. And we also have value-based procurement. So this is about us developing a standardized methodology for assessing value at a national level. So something else that we heard during engagement is that innovation is great, but if we're only looking at lowest cost, we will miss the potential of products that have value to the entire pathway. And we know there are great examples across England of value-based procurement being done, but there's no consistency. So what we want to do is provide clarity out to industry on how we'll be assessing value over things like patient outcomes, system efficiencies, improving the workforce, sustainability, supply resilience, and clarifying that at a national level. So it's clear for both industry on what the NHS constitutes as valuable, but also clear to our procurement professionals on how they should be procuring technology. And then I can go into a bit more detail into the regulatory reforms that are currently going on across GB. So the Regulatory of Medical Devices, the Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or the MHRA, is working to update the medical device regulations. So the MHRA held a public consultation on proposals for regulatory changes to form the future medical device regime in autumn 2021. We then published a response to that consultation in 2022 and outlined the proposals for change. Then we passed legislation last summer to extend the recognition of medical devices from the EU up to 2030, depending on the certificate of the device holds. And this is to ensure the continued supply of medical devices as we transition to the new framework. This is the roadmap to delivering the future regulations as we take a stepwise approach to the delivery of the changes. As you'll see in 2024, we intend to put in place new post-market surveillance requirements that will ensure higher risk devices are subject to additional requirements once placed on the market to ensure the protection of patients. The MHRA is also conducting stakeholder engagement on the specific changes in the regulations to make sure we get this right. And then in 2025, we expect to be laying the core framework before the new regulations take effect. This will include an international recognition framework, which will make it easier for manufacturers of devices with approval from trusted overseas regulators to place their device on the GB market. And details of this should be announced later this month. Thank you everybody for listening, and really happy to take any questions on the IDAP or wider initiatives within the medtech strategy.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for that very rich insights on IDAP. And I trust there are some questions from the audience as well here. But before that, I would like to check. I just have a couple of questions here with me, which I thought I'll just check with you. So this IDAP procedure, how different is it from any other normal device that goes through the normal procedure of approval?
So the IDAP is sort of offering a hand-holding approach. So the normal approach to getting something on the UK market is you would go through the same processes. So you'd engage with MHRA, you'd engage with NICE, you would engage with NHSE for the adoption. But what we have is a really unique offer in that the partners are working directly with those companies, and we have those sort of safe harbour meetings where the company can directly engage with the partners and they can understand exactly what the requirements are. So although we don't specifically provide the UKCA marking, the health tech assessments through the pilot, we provide sort of unparamounted advice and support through direct consultation, exactly what they're looking for when they come to providing that regulatory assessment or that health tech assessment. It's also the first example in the UK of the system partners working together. So in one room, the company can have representation from NICE, representation from MHRA, NHS England, clinicians, patient experts, and they can get all of that advice in one place, which is a really unique offering.
I see. That's good to know. Thank you. And how do we ensure that the quality and safety of these devices, especially given the technologies could be quite nascent, right? So how do we ensure the quality and safety of these products? So are there any continuous monitoring procedures in the plan or any conformity requirements with regards to that?
So all medical devices, including innovative devices, must meet the requirements of the medical device regulations from 2002. But these are being amended, as I just mentioned, but prior to being placed on the market. So for the purposes of the Great Britain market, UK approved bodies can conduct conformity assessments in relation to the UKCA marking for medical devices. And this includes software as a medical device, implantable medical devices, and also in vitro diagnostic devices. But the IDAP pilot has created a roadmap for each of its selected 8 technologies, which supports innovators in understanding the evidence data required to submit their regulatory approval and health tech assessments. And the programme also facilitates patient access in the NHS, but this does not substitute for the existing conformity assessment process. As with all products in development, some might not make it to market for many reasons, some of which are out of the remit of the programme. But the IDAP aims to support technologies in generating quality data. And this is not the same as supporting companies to place products on the market that have not gone through a rigorous assessment. So entering the programme is no guarantee of that UKCA marking or a positive health tech assessment will be granted. And then, as I mentioned before, in certain circumstances, companies can apply to the MHRA for an exceptional use authorisation, which will enable them to put their product on the market before gaining a UKCA or a CE mark. But again, there's no guarantee this will be granted, as patient safety is paramount, and it's not an alternative route to market either, as it is just temporary. And to get that exceptional use authorisation, you have to prove that you are meeting an unmet clinical need in the NHS, which all the pilot technologies have done. That's outside of the pilot.
Yeah, understand. Yep. Okay, we'll move on to some of the questions that are there in the Q&A as of now. So there's one question with regards to fees. So is there any fees for companies going through the IDAP?
No, so this is a completely funded programme by the UK government. So because we're in the pilot stages, what we want to do is really test the offer. So we want to generate the evidence, make sure we're getting it right. So we fund the advice. We don't provide direct funding to the companies, but we fund our partners to deliver the advice, so MHRA, NICE, NHSE. We have a similar program, which is the Innovative Licensing Access Pathway, which is very similar to the IDAP, but it's for medicines. This is a bit more of an established program, so we're beyond the pilot for the ILAP, and there is a cost fee structure for that ILAP. So one of the things we will explore in the future is whether to attach a cost fee model to the IDAP, but I imagine that will be very much in the future, so we can make sure that we've got it right before we provide any costings.
Great. The next question is from Eddie. So following UK's new position in the continental Europe, can you elaborate a little bit more on MHRA's position on its global regulatory reliance strategy, in particular for medical devices, and if IDAP pilot has any such considerations?
Yes, I think this probably goes back to the regulatory reform update. So we are looking into international recognition. So currently CE marking and UKCA are both approved for products to reach the UK market, but we will be transitioning towards the UKCA. But we are looking into international recognition. So in certain circumstances and certain approved international regulatory bodies, we're looking at how we can accept those authorizations for the UK market as well. I can't say too much about it at the moment because it is still being worked out, but hopefully there should be some news on that soon.
Okay. And are the post-market surveillance requirements any different for IDAP?
No, they'll be exactly the same.
I see. Okay. Okay, that's pretty clear. Yeah, and would IDAP be applicable for a new multiple vaccine dose dispenser applicable for mass vaccination campaigns? So that's another question from Debashis.
So we are not accepting on the IDAP any devices that directly cross over with a pharmaceutical. So it just has to be a medical device at the moment. Mm-hmm. It is something we're looking at in the future, is maybe potentially bringing the ILAP and the IDAP together, but very much in the future and subject to further evaluations and research.
Okay. In fact, this brings me back to your presentation. I saw that there was a pre-symptom health InfectiClear, which detects infection and sepsis based on genomics, and also an app for fatigue management. So I trust these are things which can actually be directly provided to the consumers, right? So in that case, do you see more of such direct-to-consumer applications coming in as well in your applications, or where do you foresee them?
We saw quite a range, actually. It was very interesting. So we had a good range of digital IVDs. So that's kind of what we were trying to go for when we selected the 8 technologies, was that portfolio approach, so that we could make sure that we were testing the tools against the different types of medical devices as well, because the sort of data requirements and the advice we provide to for example, software as a medical device might be very different to the advice that we provide to an IVD, for example. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But we were open to all medical devices, so including software as a medical device. We have, I think, 3 examples of AI in our pilot technologies, but also those devices as well. So things like histosonics with the histotripsy for liver cancer.
Okay. So, and I trust this is purely only for devices, or do you also consider service aspects that can be provided directly to the consumers? So what is your take on that? Because we do see a lot of convergence between devices and services happening now, right? So where do you see this?
So it had to meet, in order to be eligible for the pilot, it had to meet the MHRA medical device definition, mm-hmm. So which includes software as a medical device, but not services specifically.
Okay, I see. Okay, there's one more question here in the chat. How many applicants were there for IDAP, and how many were finally selected? How long was the process for application or selection?
So for the pilot itself, we had reduced timescale. So this is something we're really keen to improve for the next time. So we selected 8 technologies, but we had over 80 applications. So we were 10 times oversubscribed, which was great news. So it really showed the interest in the pilot. And I think we had about 10% of those were from international applicants. So we launched the pilot in the beginning of September last year, and I think we closed for expressions of interest in end of October, sorry. So we were open for about 6 to 7 weeks. But we know for the amount of evidence and sort of the questions we asked, that was still quite tight. So something we're really keen to improve for next time is having a longer window for companies to provide their evidence and gather all the data that we asked for. So then once we closed, I think it was the 31st of October, we then assess the technologies for a couple of months. So we made the announcement on the 14th of February. So it was about a 3-month process where we were going through the selection criteria, but it was a very stringent selection criteria to make sure that we were really picking the most exciting technologies and ones that would also apply to our portfolio approach. So initially, technologies were selected against the eligibility criteria. So this was things like, are they even a medical device? Do they meet an unmet clinical need? And that was assessed by our colleagues within MHRA, but also clinicians, to make sure that we were picking technologies that met the needs of our patients. Following the eligibility criteria, we then assess technologies against the selection criteria. So those are the ones that I went through before. So that's does the technology meet a seriously debilitating or life-threatening disease? Does it meet one of the life science vision missions? Is it innovative and transformative? So that is where we actually brought in the innovation classification framework. So we had that definition of what does transformative mean or radical technology mean. And that was, we had all the partners on board for that one. So everybody that's involved with the pilot, including Scotland and Wales as well. So that's another really good positive of the IDAP pilot, is that it is a pan-UK approach. So we have 2 of our devolved administration colleagues involved as well. But we went through a very stringent and very live discussion for each of the technologies. So we went through each one by one, and really discussed the sort of benefits where we think they could really benefit from the IDAP if they were maybe not quite suited for the IDAP. And then we got to our sort of final 10 and then got down to our final 8. But we did reach out to other companies that were the sort of near misses for the pilot to offer them further advice and support as well. So there were some technologies that we were really excited about, but maybe just didn't align with our portfolio approach. So we still reached out to offer them a bit of support as well.
That's nice. So what about risk minimization digital tools? Are they under the scope of IDAP? And if yes, to what extent are they under that?
I'll have to take that one away, I'm afraid. I don't work directly on medical device regulations, so I wouldn't want to speak for MHRA, but I can take that one away and I can respond.
Okay, sure. And what kind of challenges did you face in this entire process?
So definitely timeframes. It's a very good question. Timeframes have been a little bit challenging because we're a pilot. So we wanted to make sure that we were giving the technologies the longest amount of time in that pilot. But as with every program, with lots of partners involved and complexities involved, it took a while to get it off the ground. So making sure we were getting the offer right, making sure that we were selecting the right technologies, for example. So what is our selection criteria appropriate? So the actual selection of the technologies and getting that done in sort of the 3-month period was quite challenging. So we wanted to make sure we were bringing all of the appropriate people on board. So we had all our partners. So we had representatives from NHS England, NICE, Wales, Scotland, NHSE, but we also had a couple of our national clinical directors for the NHS involved as well, to make sure that we had that sort of on the ground experience of where they see the priorities being. And we reflected that in the selection criteria as well. But apart from that, it's been a really great opportunity and really great experience of working so closely with our system colleagues, because although we work with them often, we don't work with them sort of this specifically and this collaboratively on a single project, and we've really learned a lot of lessons from this, what we can apply to other initiatives as well, and formed really great working relationships across the partnership.
That's nice. Apart from the selection criteria, in terms of the quality of the research, there is one question there in the chat. How was the quality of the research assessed to determine eligibility, or if further evidence generation was necessary?
So we asked a lot of questions in our expressions of interest. So we asked questions such as, what evidence have you already generated? The companies had to have a clinical investigation site lined up in the UK, so that was another eligibility criteria. And we asked them to provide, they also had to provide a recommendation letter from a clinician. They had to provide a bit of an economic assessment as well. But there was a variation in the sort of responses that we got back, which I think is part of the fact that it's a pilot. So for a little sort of lessons learned for next time, we would very much specify like a best case example of what the evidence we're looking for to support a technology, because we know, because we also took that portfolio approach where we've got early, mid and late stage technologies, we know that some companies won't have as much evidence as in the early stages as the technologies would in the late stages. So for example, some technologies that applied already had FDA approvals. They would have had a much richer evidence bank than those technologies that were very much the beginning of the journey. So we did take that into consideration when we were assessing the evaluation, the data, and evaluating that data. But because that's one of the main objectives of the pilot, is to support them in generating that evidence. As long as we could see that capability there, then very much that's what we are aiming to do, is to support them with that evidence generation. So where we saw capability and potential, that's sort of where we zoomed in on.
That's nice. And what about any preliminary impact that you've had of the IDAP so far?
In terms of the sort of technologies
outcomes, technologies. So what do you see? What would you infer in terms of the preliminary impact?
So we started delivering some of the tools, but we can't really say publicly how those tools are going and how the sort of specific timelines of the companies themselves. But we've had a really great response from the companies themselves, and also a lot of excitement within the industry that we are looking at this accelerated pathway, and lots of interest from other initiatives on how we've worked together to create a system collaboration, because it truly is unique as to how we're working on one program. So I think the impacts at the moment, before we can say any more about the technologies themselves, are much more in the space of the program itself and how we've been learning from the program and the pilot, and how we'll take forward the learnings and the sort of best practice, applying it both to an IDAP 2.0, but also to a wider range of initiatives. So we're sort of that bigger picture piece of work that we're looking at, which is that sort of streamlining access to the market in general, not just through the IDAP, but how can we make it clearer for companies who want to access the UK market, exactly what the stages are involved. So the IDAP has been a really key learner for that.
So is there scope for you to improve or extend this further?
Hopefully, that's what we're hoping for. So we're evaluating as we're going. So we have an evaluation in-house, and we also have commissioned somebody externally to provide the sort of industry evaluation to make sure we're not just marking our own homework. So we have commissioned an external company who are interviewing people that applied for the IDAP and weren't successful, and what their impressions were, how they found the selection process, how they found the application process, and get their feedback on how it was, so we can implement those changes. But we've also got that same company working directly with the companies themselves who are experiencing the pilot, and they interview them and get their feedback regularly. So we know that what we're doing well, what we can improve for next time, both within the pilot itself. So we're learning as we're going. This is the first time we've done this. So we're taking a very sort of open approach to how can we improve. We hold sort of regular sessions across the partners on how things have gone for the last sort of month, 6 weeks, how can we improve for next time, but also taking all those learnings and thinking about the second more formal IDAP that we're hoping to be working towards, and how we can really strengthen it for next time.
Yeah. So when will the next slot for applications be open for IDAP?
So
we question from the audience.
It's a very good question. One I can't answer very specifically, but I will try at the high level. So we closed the IDAP pilots at the end of March 2025. But what we're really keen, as I've been saying, is to make sure we're learning from this, so that we will want a bit of time to learn from the full pilot itself. So we've got that sort of summing up, how did it all go at the very end, engaging with the companies, seeing where they got to, getting their feedback, and then feeding that evaluation and the lessons learned into the development of that second IDAP, making sure that it's still the most appropriate thing to be doing. So we hope so, and we think it is, but you never know until we've got all of those learnings in and we've got that evaluation in. So is the IDAP still the right direction? Do we need to change it in any way? And then the sort of degree of those changes would probably also impact on those timelines, but we are very keen to establish it as a formal program, but it is just sort of subject to the sort of the different evaluations and the different sort of funding processes as well.
Yeah, that's good. And are patient-focused outcomes being considered for evaluation of this initiative?
Yeah, so it's something that we really champion through the IDAP is the patient voice. So I should have mentioned before, but on the selection panel, we had 2 patient representatives. So patients were in the room when we were selecting the technologies. So they had an equal voice at the table. So where the partners were discussing a technology and they were sort of discussing the pros and the cons, the patient voice was there and they were able to say, yes, this would really benefit me in my day-to-day life, or I've already seen something like this before, and this would be my preference over this one, for example. And we've had the patients there throughout, so they were also involved in the sort of sifting of the companies as well. They were involved in establishing what the selection criteria were and the eligibility criteria, and they're still involved now. So they attend things like the Access Forum, so that they can actively engage with the companies, give them their perspectives. And as part of the application process as well, there was remit for companies to submit a patient testimony alongside their product, which sort of gave that on the ground perspective. And there were some really brilliant testimonies that came through, very far reaching on the different types of devices as well. But yeah, it's another thing that's been a really key strength of the IDAP, and something that other programs have been learning from as well, is about how we bring the patient into the center of this process.
Yeah, that's quite crucial, right? Patient voice is very important. True.
Yeah, it's something that the department really prioritises as well. So we work very closely with the UK has a patient safety commissioner, who's that sort of patient voice to the government. So they sit on our programme board for the MedTech strategy, and we also have a regular patient engagement forum. So we invite patient groups, patient representatives, and patients themselves to a regular stand-up, and we give them an update on everything we've been doing, and we also then present them with the opportunity to engage with us further. So we want to make sure we have a really sort of open relationship with patients, make sure they're involved throughout, so from the beginning right through to the development of different initiatives, so including the IDAP as well.
That's very nice. Okay, you had already answered this question about funding, but there's some addition to it. So how does the funding flow? Do applicants receive it? I trust applicants, you mentioned, don't receive it, right? But are there any funding for hospitals to generate evidence? So that's another part of the same question.
There's not. So part of the Access Forum is that the NHS work with the company, and they provide them guidance on the sort of access stages they can go through, the sort of different options. We're still sort of working out how that will work in practice, because it is very specific to the company themselves. So the advice that we provide will be very tailored to their sort of specific requirements. Does their technology require capital spend, for example, as opposed to resource spend? So if it's got a high capital spend, the sort of advice and the sort of processes will be very different to something that has a lower capital spend. But all of those companies will be getting that access support and guidance on how to get into the NHS. But the funding itself is for the advice. So they're having those specialists in the room and providing that advice. But we do have people at the NHS trust level, so at that local level, they're also involved with these conversations, NHS supply chain, so frameworks, and how trusts will get those technologies into hospitals.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So in terms of future plans, so are you thinking of collaborating with neighboring countries or other kind of collaborators to see if harmonization is possible across the globe? Because cross-border challenges are becoming more and more common in the digital health field, right? So do you think or do you foresee any such plans for the future?
So it's not something that's currently in scope for the IDAP itself, but we do find these sort of engagements really beneficial to understand people's perceptions, particularly we speak to our industry stakeholders very frequently within the UK, but it's a brilliant opportunity to hear from international industry perspectives as well, and how you're viewing the UK and how you see the access to the UK. We also work really closely with our Department for Business and Trade, so we engage with them very frequently on the sort of work we're doing, and they are our sort of like international voice, so they have those really trusted relationships internationally. But as a sort of my wider team, we do a fair amount of international engagement, so attending conferences, visiting sort of neighbouring countries to understand the work that they're doing, and presenting what we're doing as well, because it's such a dynamic field and things are always changing. There is so much to learn that we can learn from others, and also we can provide information on what we're doing as well.
Okay, there's one more question there. Are there different streams for health technologies with early, mid, and late readiness? If so, can you please share what the streams look like?
So we currently have health tech assessments, so that's the sort of comprehensive approach, and we have something called the early value assessment, so this is the EVA, and this is for technologies which are much earlier in their life cycle, so they provide them the support and guidance to generate evidence, and we also have something called late stage assessments. So this is one of the initiatives I mentioned earlier, so this is the sort of late stage, the technology might already be established and on the market, but we'll be assessing them against their sort of different value attributes, their cost effectiveness, and providing a sort of comparison of which technologies provide the best value for those different attributes. So if somebody's looking for a technology that presents sort of workforce efficiencies, then we'll sort of have a bit of an analysis on that and an assessment on that, and it's providing that clarity to procurement professionals but also clinicians, so they can make an informed decision about the technologies they're providing to their patients, but also an element that it's available for patients to look at as well, so patients can have that sort of informed decision making in the technologies and really understand sort of the things they're being prescribed and how they're being treated.
Okay, great. I think we are done with the questions. Most of the questions have been answered. Yes, I think, yeah, I'm conscious of time as well. Yep. Thank you so much, Sophie, for your extensive sharing on the IDAP. And we are looking forward to the second one as well. Let's see how it goes. And thank you so much. With this, I end this webinar. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.